Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. My name is Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I welcome you to join me as I talk to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation on the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page or access additional VIP content as a premium subscriber via Patreon. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can get an early access to episodes, additional bonus content, and your chance to connect with my guests. To do so, simply visit patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. Let's talk near death.
Well, I was deeply afraid of dying before I died. I died on an operating table after a major car accident. Then the thing that surprised me were the angels at the end of the bed. It was beautiful and fun, and I was beginning to feel this deep intelligence coming toward me.
Today I'm joined by Tricia Barker, who had a profound near-death experience following a car accident during her senior year of college. Her experience changed her so much, and it guided her to teach, both overseas and in public schools and colleges in the US. Tricia is author of Angels in the OR, which has been featured on multiple platforms worldwide. Her book not only shares her experience, but it focuses on the importance of being of service to the world and the healing power of giving unconditional love to others. Tricia Barker, welcome to Let's Talk Near Death.
Thank you. So happy to chat with you today.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on here. I think there's so much going on in the world, and I know that this conversation is going to really help. Well, it's going to help me, but it's going to help many other people who are listening. So thank you. Can you tell us a little bit, where did your experience start? What happened? Take us back to the beginning.
All right, you are correct that these experiences are here to bring us peace, and especially in times of turmoil. I was deeply afraid of dying before I died. Yep. I was a college student and I was agnostic, and I thought about, wow, someday I'm going to die and this body will just return to the earth and I don't know what happens, and that's frightening. I don't want to die. I was so attached to the physical. Well, I died on an operating table after a major car accident. So I was on my way to run the Austin 10K. I was about to graduate that year, and I was full of hope and optimism and wanted to, in some ways, take on the world in this sense that I wanted to make a lot of money. But in a spiritual sense, I was deeply hurting. In an emotional sense, I was deeply hurting and lost as a person. And when this car accident happened, I couldn't move. So I broke my back in 3 places. I broke my foot, and I had lots of internal injuries. So I was basically just slumped over in the side of the car, and I couldn't reach my glove box. And I knew, this is bad. I can't reach my license. Everything depends on the healthcare professionals at this time, if they're going to step in. And I waited for a long time in a hospital. So as I look at pandemics and as I look at the world right now, my heart just goes out to anyone who's waiting in a hospital, and my heart goes out to all the wonderful healthcare professionals, because the nurses who held my hand and comforted me meant the world to me. So the people who said, yes, even though your back is broken, you might walk. I'm not supposed to tell you that, but, I'd lost feeling in one of my legs and I was a runner. So this was, horrifying to a young person. And everyone who was kind, the surgeon who was off duty and decided to operate on me, despite the fact that I didn't have health insurance as a college student, she meant the world to me. She had been on duty for 40 hours and she went home, took a nap, ate some dinner, and came back and operated on me. And I waited in that ER for 17 hours after
17.
MRIs. Yes.
Wow.
MRIs, CAT scans, and just waiting there crying. Just tears running out of my eyes, losing feeling in my legs and going, what is happening? I lost complete feeling in my left leg, so they could squeeze the toes, nothing. And I was horrified. So when I went into surgery, I had this form to sign, and it said 17% chance of death. And I thought,
Yeah,
specific,
yeah, 17.
Yeah, I was like, but I'm young. Yeah, I can beat those odds. So you can be, you can think, of death in one way and then have a near death experience and be totally transformed by the experience. So they took me in for spinal surgery. And at some point during the surgery, it probably had been going on for a while, I lifted up out of my body. And I saw that my back was opened from very high up, and the hip was opened because they took bone from the hip and put it into the back. And there was so much blood. My first thought was, I'd seen MASH and different stories like that.
Yeah.
And I thought, I didn't realize it's that brutal. This is gruesome.
Wow.
There was so much blood everywhere. And later I found out that my cause of death was I bled to death. I had internal injuries. And so too much blood loss occurred in that somewhere in that surgery. But my first thought when I lifted up out of body was, yes, we go on, because I had this essential knowing that my spirit form was real. Like this was the true reality. My first thought was, oh, this physical world that we're playing around in, that's not the real reality. It's almost like a play or a theater. And the spirit is the truth. And it was just like the door opened and I got it. And I was like, oh, okay, here's my true self. This is what matters. And I quickly assimilated into that knowing and that solidity of my spirit body. Then the thing that surprised me were the angels at the end of the bed, and they were huge, like 9 feet tall. And people always ask, well, what do angels look like? And I'm assuming that they look different to every person because your own angels are there to guide you. My angels were these huge beings, and they spoke with telepathy through their eyes, and they said, you're going to be fine. It's okay. Watch this. And what they showed me just changed everything. I saw them send this light through the back of the surgeons, in through the surgeon's hands, and my entire physical body just lit up with light. And I knew this light was assisting and helping heal my body, and that I'd walk and that I'd live and I'd be fine. And I was grateful to them. And I honestly, I chuckled a little because that's my personality. And I thought, these brilliant neurosurgeons have no idea that angels are working through them. And they're going to think I'm nuts when I tell them later, but I'm going to tell them.
Yeah, great. They think that they're doing a really good job, but it's not them at all.
Yeah. Well, they are of service. They were there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They were the vehicles, but they perhaps just had no idea that they're assisted from the other side. And I know that surgeons, I've talked with them afterwards, have great sorrow when they lose a patient because it's their patient, and they always want to win, and they look at death as a loss. So when my heart monitor stopped, I'm sure they went into absolute panic because I saw them all jump back, because after the angels did that, I heard that sound, that undeniable beep, and I was like, oh, the body's dead now. And then I just left that room. My near-death experience has been studied because I have a verifiable detail outside of body, and that detail was seeing my stepdad get a candy bar. And he was a health nut, and so it was kind of funny to see him getting a Snickers. And then later I found out he had this secret desire for junk food, and he kept, a lot of Oreos and Snickers in his closet, but he pretended to be super healthy.
Caught out.
So I caught him doing that, and I thought, well, just in case I don't come back, I hope he has a good life. I hope he's good to my mom. I didn't know him very well. They'd gotten married when I was in college. And then I just continued on, and I felt immediately this connection to everyone in the city of Austin where I lived. And it was almost as if death just gave me this wish to go, I love you, have a good life. I mean, I think that's the essential wish of everyone's soul, is even if you've been harmed by someone and desperately harmed by someone, it's like, hey, be better to others. I love you. God loves you. Goodbye. I mean, that's kind of the honest, at a soul level, I think that's who we all are. So I kind of spread that. And then I saw how every moment is sacred. And I think in a time of a pandemic like this, we're all seeing every little interaction is sacred. Just waving to someone across the street, just smiling at your neighbor, just playing with your pet. When death looms around the corner as a possibility, people become more grateful, but we could be grateful at all moments. We could live that way. And that's a better way to live. And I think the near-death experience is like this reset. And I was reset in that moment, just to see the sacredness of every interaction. And then transitioned, and a lot of near-death experiencers do, into this night sky, which kind of looked like the cosmos, and it was beautiful and fun. And I was beginning to feel this deep intelligence coming toward me, like the love of God or the intelligence of God. The intelligence of the angels was like this healing light that was sent through their eyes, but God's light was just far away at this point, but it was coming towards me. And I was like, okay, this is great. I'm not alone. So even though my soul was out there in the middle of the stars, I was not alone. I felt God. And then God showed me my life, the classic life review. And I didn't see a lot of it, but I saw certain moments in childhood. Like, that was important. The faith of a child, the joy of a child. This is what we all need to remember. And I heard the words clearly, be like a little child. And it was strange how words started coming at me, but that was that word that came at me. Another word or sentence that came at me was, love is all that matters. Almost as if my soul needed to be imprinted with these messages. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to come back, is that what I have to tell people? Love is all that matters. At the time, I thought, this kind of sounds like a Beatles song, God. Can you give me an equation or something? Like something profound about aliens and but love is all that matters. It's like, okay, I'll write a song. But what I have found is that message is vitally important, because it's not romantic love is all that matters. It's, are you a loving person? Are you giving love to this world? How loving are you? In every interaction that you do, every business transaction, everything that you build, everything that you do, is it infused with love? When you start looking at it from that perspective, then you think, that's the currency that gets me into heaven. Like, that's the currency. Everything else is like a shadow. So if it isn't love, it isn't real. And that was the clarity that I saw there. It's all that matters. And so in that moment, I was like, okay, I get it. And then I saw how I had gotten off track. So as a Gen Xer, my accident happened in the 90s, and it's kind of, how do you say it, cliquish, that I was judgmental, but not in an overt way, but I just thought, I only want to interact with people who like the same music, the same movies, the same clothes, just as young people do. And what God showed me was the lovely people I was missing out on. There was this couple who was older than me, and they didn't wear stylish clothes, and they were kind of humble, and they hadn't gone to college, and they put me in their prayers at night. And it still brings tears to my eyes. I was so humbled that people that I didn't even like took the time to love me. And when I saw that, I just thought, oh, Tricia, be better. Be better as a person. Don't judge people by their outward qualities. Judge them by their hearts, and as God does. And even if they aren't being loving people, teach them how to be loving. Show them how to be loving. And you be that love. You be that openness from now on. And I saw, like, oh, they blessed me in a way that I'll never be able to repay, just including me in their prayers. They saw me as depressed and cold and, judgmental. And I was those things. And I was deeply humbled. And then I think that's mainly what God wanted to show me. I hadn't been a bad person. I wasn't a bully. I wasn't, like stealing things, any self-harm that I had done. It was just like washed away. It was kind of like God was saying, be better to yourself, be better to others. That's all. It wasn't this judgment, but it was an accountability. That's how I saw the life review, is like our soul can learn. It can learn from these moments. And the next thing that happened was I transitioned into what some people would call heaven. I still, in beautiful moments in nature, I try to bring in that energy of that place, because it was like nature untouched in its absolute beauty. Probably you see a lot of that in New Zealand. Just
It's beautiful here. Yeah.
just untouched nature, and there was nothing that was dying. Everything was new and pure, and my grandfather was the only person who had died at that time, and he showed up and he looked very young.
Oh,
His
wow.
face was glowing, his eyes were glowing, he had this square jaw, kind of like me, and just he looked amazing. I was like, he picked, and a lot of people do pick like 35 or 40, like, or 25 to 35, somewhere in there.
Mm.
Maybe because you're not young and silly at that age, but you like come into your own,
Yeah.
in your 30s, and yet you still look young. And so that was what he looked like to me, and he gave me comfort. There was an odd part of my near-death experience. He showed up in a truck, and most people say, why would you see a truck in heaven? Doesn't that prove that that's a hallucination? And I said, no, because already I was learning that you can manifest there very quickly, and you can make yourself look younger. My grandfather, I saw, looked younger, so I made myself into a kid, the age of
Ah,
about 5, because I often played with him. He
yeah.
died when I was 10, so it made more sense for me to be a child, and I had heard be like a little child. So if you have the faith of a child, you just enter into that realm so easily, because you're just made for it. And I entered that realm with purity. And my grandfather did what he did when I was a kid, which was he let me get in the back of the truck, and my feet went through the grass, and he was driving me along. And at some point he leaned out and he said, do you want to continue on? And I said, yes, because I looked up and I saw God's light. And I'm one
Mm-hmm.
of the people that didn't see God as a person, as a man with a gray beard, but I saw just the
Mm.
light of God. But it was like a magnet. I've never felt anything that good. So I'd experienced romantic love. I had a family. I knew that this love was far more powerful than anything I'd ever felt. And I never had felt so good. So my spirit just flew towards God. And then I felt people's prayers trying to pull me back. And I felt one aunt who'd lost a young daughter in her 20s or 30s. And she was praying to God that I not die, because she didn't believe parents should go through the pain that she had gone through. And I wanted to tell her, it's okay, you'll see her soon, and everything's fine, and this is not a big deal, and
Mm.
she's not suffering, this is not a big deal, death is not terrible. And I just brushed through the prayers like no big deal. And at that point I was beginning to lose contact with earth. I didn't care about coming back, because I felt such joy, such healing, such peace
Mm.
that I'd never felt in my entire life. I'd lived with anxiety. I'd lived with trepidation. I'd lived with fear. I'd grown up with a neglectful father and an abusive mother. And I want to clarify that, because I've said that in different ways. They were trying their best. They were doing their best, and they were
Mm.
wounded themselves. And I think it was Louise Hay who said, if we look at our parents as little wounded children, it's so easy to forgive them. And they were just coming out of this world thinking that they were doing the right thing by having me, trying to love me in the best way that they could, but suffering. And yet it didn't engender a lot of how do you say it, affection or connection, because I'd grown up without that for a
Mm.
large degree. Now, every abusive parent is not 100% abusive. and so, there was good and bad. But it really left me feeling not that attached, like I could leave them
Mm.
behind and it wasn't that big of a deal. So part of me just wanted to stay with God. I was like, okay, goodbye. You
Mm.
did your best. I want to stay here. This is great. But at some point, God said, look down. And I saw, and it was just that same way of telepathy. Communication was told to me that you're going to be a teacher, not a spiritual teacher, an actual teacher in schools. And you're going to help other people turn on their lights, find their true potential, remember God, and remember truth, light. And if they can turn on their lights, their whole world will change. And that's my entire mission, is to help them access their joy. And as great as that mission sounded, I was really kind of angry. And I said, no.
Did you not want to be a teacher?
No. I grew up poor. I knew that was not going to be a lucrative profession. To make money and, just have that level of security. I thought maybe, after some free-spirited travel and living in different cities, I would go to law school. And God was like, nope. And that was the last thing that I knew, is that I was kicked out of heaven with that image. And I have to say that it was that God knows better than us, that I'm just a natural teacher, and I have a natural way of helping people follow their dreams and give it a shot. And many times it works out. And, I know that it's a skill that God knew I was right for. And also, oddly enough, in the most difficult of times, who's doing well? Teachers. We still have a job.
Exactly. Right now.
I've never been hungry. I've never suffered as a teacher. Have I had extravagances? Not that many, but I know how to live well and to live close to nature, and to know every day that it is the heart that matters the most. It is love that matters the most. And, lucky me, I get to, in my next life review, I get to see all the love that I gave to students, and know that that's a part of my soul, and that could be a better mission. Would I have been able to do that as an editor or lawyer? Probably not as much, and it's interesting, but there's a lot of after effects to near-death experiences. But in case someone hasn't heard my story, that's the near-death experience.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tricia. That is a very in-depth near-death experience. I love it. As you were talking, I couldn't help my mind wandering. When you're talking about your life review, how did you did you physically see it with eyes? You talked about how things were communicated through telepathy. Can you come into more detail around the life review?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there was this night sky, and it was almost as if that light of God opened up a 3D realm, like a movie, like you're watching something, and there were little bubbles. I saw having faith as a child, praying in the grass, and the rabbits that came near me as I prayed and meditated as a child. And it was almost like a little movie. And then when I saw the coworkers who were praying for me, I felt their hearts. It was almost as if I became part of the movie, and I felt what they felt. And I saw myself the way I interacted with them. And that's what hit home so much, is just the purity of their hearts. And so that was how it was communicated. It was like you see a 3D element, but then you're a part of it as well. I think Danny and Brinkley had a similar experience where he was the bully, and he felt what it was like to be beaten up by someone.
Exactly. That's amazing. And as that was happening, were you thinking of your physical body back in the operating theatre, or were you totally disconnected from this point to your body?
Yeah, I was totally disconnected at that point. That's another good question. I just had forgotten it. And, I was only dead for 2.5 minutes. That's clinically a little over 2.5 minutes. But it felt like months or weeks, or in that timeless environment, who can say, because it felt like there were little vignettes of learning. And the closer I got to God, the more I could care less about the body. I think that was the main thing, that initially I saw it. And even in those first moments, I was disconnected from it. But as the consciousness continued and grew, there was less awareness. I think when God was telling me I was going back and I was thinking about this life, it's a challenge for all of us. We all have a mission, on some level. And I think it was almost as if my soul was a little bit tired, and it was like, oh, really? I have to go back. There was this feeling of, okay, this is, I know, not going to be 100% easy, but got to do it.
Now, I know you're probably really enjoying this episode, but I wanted to pop in and let you know how you can further support the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Every little bit of input helps me, it encourages me, and it enables me to be able to bring in more guests, share more episodes, and release more content. If you're financially able, you can pop over and become a VIP subscriber for just a couple of dollars a month. If not, you may want to consider leaving a review on iTunes, sharing an episode with a friend, or connecting over with the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page. Every little bit of input helps me. Thank you for listening, thank you for your support, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
So you were aware the entire time that you were dead, that you were separate from your body?
Yeah, but the consciousness was, I have to tell you, kind of fun, to be able to fly.
Oh, I'm sure. I can't wait.
And that's maybe what's different from, I've had out-of-body experiences and I've had lots of experiences in meditation. And I've heard many people say that, it's the same as a near-death experience. But there's one key difference. There's a deep disconnect from the body in a near-death experience. Like, at some point you're done with it. You might not return, you might return. But that line makes it all the more powerful, I think, the experience, because that cord, when you're having an out-of-body experience or meditating, you kind of know you're coming back and you're fine. But in a near-death experience, you think, I could leave it, and there's almost seems to be a little bit of, you're told to return, you're not sure if you want to return, there's that element. And then there's that element of trauma, which is hard to process. I do a few of these interviews too, and sometimes it's hard for me to hear people go through the physical trauma of it. It's painful.
Absolutely. And so that was my next question, was, as you came back into your body, were you aware that was happening? Did you just wake up? People talk about popping out of their body and squeezing back in. Do you have any memory of what that process was like?
Yeah, so that's another good question. It was like a dark wind was pushing me back into the body. So there was all that light, and that's the way I felt near God. And then I felt kind of like some of it was being shut off by being back in the body. And that made me angry. I was like, no, I still want the light.
Yeah.
But when I woke up, I realized I still had some of that light, because people kept, I'm one of the few people that I know that was super vocal right after my near-death experience. Like, as soon as they took the tracheotomy out of me and I could talk, I was like, I died. How long was I dead?
Wow.
I knew it. I'd heard of near-death experiences. There wasn't a single moment of doubt. My only fear in those moments was the morphine that they were giving me. I thought, is this going to erase my memory? Am I going to forget this? So I tried to write some of it down. I had no idea that it'd be the strongest memory of my life, that I could never forget those moments.
Okay, that was a question I had, was whether that faded over any time, or was there an element where you thought perhaps that was just a crazy dream, or perhaps I am a bit crazy?
Well, no, I think because maybe it was my background, having an abusive mom and being kind of at odds with people. Most of the people in my family thought differently from me. They're very traditional, and I was different, from a typical Texan, and I think I was used to being at odds with people. So when my family made jokes about, oh, it must be the morphine, and oh, she's really nuts, I just thought, F you, I know I'm right and you're wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh. So then when you woke up, obviously your body has been through such a physical experience, such a traumatic experience. What was life like for you as you're in the hospital and you're healing and coming to terms with this amazing experience you've just had and the future before you?
Yeah, so it was physically painful. I had a morphine drip, and I remember hitting it fairly frequently. Keep it coming. And my back felt hot because, like a poker, like someone had just stuck a red hot poker through my spine. And and my head began to hurt, and it was an intense physical experience. But every chance I got, I felt myself struggling like this fish that was trying to come out of water, this spirit. And I'd try to connect with a nurse because my family shut me down pretty quickly. But nurses, I'd say, "Do you believe in God?" And they'd be like, yeah, I'm religious. I believe in God. I was like, did you know that God's a great big ball of loving light? And it just sends all this light into you, and it's amazing. And they were like, okie dokie.
Yeah.
But I just wouldn't give up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And as you're there in the hospital and you're processing everything, do you come back with a sense of purpose? I know you talked about how you were told that you were going to be a teacher and you were going to do all of these things. What did that then translate into when you're back in your body and going, well, my body's a bit broken right now? Did you have any questions around whether you'd be able to fulfill the purpose?
Yeah, so there was, there's the natural human selfishness that we come back to. So there's a little part of me that was like, oh, do I have to do this? And I struggled with it in the hospital. Now they have back patients up and walking within a few days. I was in ICU for 3 days and the hospital for another week. And on that 9th day, they got me up to walk. And I had a walker, and I walked to the end of the hallway, and I saw everyone graduating, or near graduation. And I was about to graduate, and they had to withdraw me from classes. And that's the moment that I allowed myself some self-pity. So I cried. I thought about my broken body. I thought how it might take a year before I get back into college. And I decided, okay, I'm going back there with a different purpose. I'm going to get my teaching certification. I'm going to figure out what this is all about. And this is my mission now. Like, if that's the last thing you hear from God, you just can't go apart from it. I knew that nothing in my life would work out if I didn't follow those orders. And so I was like, okay, God's my God's my captain now. And as long as I do that, everything will be okay. And then I turned around, and that sense of purpose was the way I had it in my mind. It didn't matter where the classroom was. It didn't matter who the students were, if they were adults, if they were little kids, if they were middle school kids, high school kids, community college, whoever they were mine, and God was going to work through me. And it wasn't going to be about me. It was going to be about God and the angels working through me. And I think that was just kind of intuitive. I just knew, I was kind of shy before the near-death experience, but there was that I changed, and I became far more extroverted because it wasn't about me. I knew that if they judged me the way I had judged those other people at work, then it didn't matter. As long as I brought my heart and my love and the energy of God to them, they'd feel it eventually, even if it was many years later.
Yeah, wow, that's so beautiful, isn't it? There's such an element of faith there as well, which I really, really admire. I love this. What is life like for you today?
Yeah, so life today is I'm still teaching at a community college, and I'm teaching online this semester because of the corona virus. I had them all 5 classes for half a semester in person, and now just using this technology. Similar to this technology, Google Hangouts, we're meeting, I see their faces, and I'm comforting them and reminding them to get through this, but they teach me too. They show me what they're doing. I have some students who work at the zoo, and so very quickly I was like, why don't we let you show us what you're looking at? And so she showed us some flamingos and penguins and animals, and I let them discuss their lives and what they're going through, and they enrich my life in so many different ways. I did write the book a few years ago because I was interviewed by National Geographic at that time. Morgan Freeman made that wonderful series. National Geographic had an article, and as I was interviewed, I realized, there's been lots of great books and lots of wonderful stories out there, but I saw very clearly that this was the time I needed to write my book as a woman who has struggled, because the journey was not easy as a woman. I think it would have been easier as a man. I think it would have been easier as a middle-aged person. But when you're young and you're somewhat vulnerable and you're poor and you're coming through society, I think it's the struggle is real. And I do think that it's important for people to realize just because you have a mission from God doesn't mean that you're not going to encounter darkness in this world, doesn't mean that you're not going to get slammed, on occasion. And how do you get through that? How do you heal? Part of my message is reminding people that no matter what you face, love is always the answer. Love for yourself, love for this world, love for other survivors and victims of crimes and situations that happen frequently in society. And I think that was why I needed to write my story, because I wasn't wealthy, I wasn't middle-aged, I was a young woman, and a young woman's story is important.
Yeah, that must have been so difficult at times. You talked there about having your mission from God. Do you think everybody has a mission from God?
I do. I really do. And sometimes that mission is just love and kindness in whatever you're doing. So, it doesn't have to be this, you must be a painter or you must be a teacher, or it's whatever you do. I think I was a rebellious soul, so I had to be thrown into something until I got the lesson 20 years later and, realized, part of my story is too, it's funny. I wanted to remind people that near-death experiencers are just human,
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're sometimes elevated to be like gurus or, people who have extra knowledge. And, we have knowledge of the other side, but we come back to human bodies, and everybody, struggles in body. Yeah. And so I wanted people to not elevate people to find their own connection to the light and their own connection to their ancestors. And so I'm misunderstood when people read my book, because I had anger to work through. I had things to still work through on a psychological level, because I was still wounded by my parents. I was still, still human. And
it doesn't disappear, does it?
No, but the answer is God's love. It's always God's love. The answer is just being open to it and saying, I can't do it. God, can you help me? And when we give up the ego, then things work better. And what I learned, and the lesson that I finally got, is one part of my life worked really well, and that was the classroom. And why it worked is I gave up my ego. I went, okay, God, you work through me. And if I can do that in every moment of my life, then it works better. Yeah. But I still struggle. I'm like, my words are better.
Oh, I love it. I love how you've constantly kept it real as our conversations progressed here. You've constantly brought it back to, we don't know everything, and you've had the experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot of stuff in terms of we're still in a body. We've still got life. We've still got memories and history and things. Now, I know your book, we've only touched the surface in our conversation here today. I know your book, Angels in the OR, goes into a lot more detail. Where can people get hold of this book?
Yeah, so there's many different ways right now on Amazon. If you're in other countries like New Zealand, I think it's on sale for like $3.70 or something. The MP3, bargain. A huge bargain for people if they want to listen to it as they're doing things around their house. I loved my woman who did the audio for it. She's so sweet. But if you want to get the paper book, of course, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, I think it is through Simon & Schuster. You can do PayPal and various things. Yeah. But whatever the case and whatever material you find out there, I just hope it uplifts you. And I hope that, you take, especially from those first chapters, the reality of the other side. I think that's what near-death experiencers bring back is, hey, it's not a dream, it's a reality.
Oh, beautiful. We will definitely include all of your links into the show notes. So if you're listening, you want to get hold of the book, just have a look in the notes below. Tricia Barker, thank you so much. What an amazing account. It's just beautiful. I love your message. I love that it comes back to love, back to treating people right, and the whole experience is just absolutely beautiful. So thank you for coming on and sharing. And I encourage our listeners to get in touch and to find out more about your book. Thank
you for your show. It's wonderful, the service you provide, and enjoy New Zealand for me.
Oh, we will. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast show. If you've enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, tell people about it. I'd love to get these messages out there. Don't forget you can also pick up your VIP access pass for additional content at patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. You can connect with us via the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page, and I look forward to catching you for another episode soon.